Good evening, everyone. I'm Katrina Tiarina, a counselor from the Colorado Springs School. On behalf of the Rocky Mountain College Night Planning Committee from Aspen High School, Colorado Academy, Dawson School, Fountain Valley School, Kent Denver, Peak to Peak Charter School, and the Colorado Springs School, I want to welcome you all to the panel session, Behind the Scenes, a look into the application review process. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Allie Duke from Dartmouth College, Lindsay Montecel from University of Richmond, and Zach Evans from the University of Chicago to offer their expertise on this topic. Please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A section. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Brad from the University of Colorado Boulder, who will be moderating the session.
Great. Thank you, Katrina, and thank you everyone for joining us. I see those numbers continuing to rise in our participants. So we're excited that you're there, and also feel free to use that Q&A portion to submit any questions that you have along the way. We've got some questions already that we're going to pose and use our expertise to help give you that glimpse behind the curtain, per se, for the application process. And to kind of set the stage for this, as we talk about the application review, if each of our panelists could just give us a rundown of, for your specific institution, how do students apply? So what application can they use to apply? What are those required elements that a student needs to submit to be reviewed? And then how does that review process work? Zach, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brad. So the University of Chicago is on both the coalition and the common application, which are applications between two of them use 1,000 on the common app or something, 150 or so on the coalition application. Either one is acceptable, no preference between them. We have 2 deadlines and 4 different ways to apply. So you can apply early November 1st or January 1st, and you can either time apply through a binding early decision round or a non-binding early action on November, and in January, a second round of a binding program called Early Decision 2, and a second round of non-binding called Regular Decision, which many institutions are going to have some combination therein. And then we're looking, and again, probably going to be echoing this a little bit, but your transcript, maybe test scores. We are a test optional institution, 2 letters of recommendation, extracurricular involvement, and a series of essays. So in addition to a personal statement on the common application or coalition application, we do require a supplement of 2 extra questions. Why do you want to come to Chicago? And then more of a creative essay. I am the Colorado representative for the University of Chicago, so I'm the first reader on every application that comes from the state of Colorado. And then we have a second reader look at applications, and then I'll come back and take another look at an applicant to kind of compile how those reads went before looking into our committee review process. And then any student who's going to be admitted to the University of Chicago is going to happen in the committee room. And I don't know, I didn't want to spend too much time. That's the quick overview of kind of how a bill becomes a law at the University of Chicago.
Great, thank you, Zach. And I'm going to go in rotation of who's on my screen. So Lindsay, if you'd like to go next for Richmond.
Sure. So some of this is going to sound pretty similar to what Zach just shared, but the University of Richmond, we accept both common application and coalition. We have no preference of which you submit. You are welcome to submit either. We require the application itself. We ask for 1 letter of recommendation, but we will accept up to 3. We do ask you to keep it to 3 because 3 times 10,000, 14,000 applications, it tends to build up. So be kind to us. We do have a supplemental essay in addition to the essay that you respond to in either common application or coalition. We are in the process of determining our questions this year, so stay tuned to what those will be for the next application cycle. We're always excited when we get some new fresh options after reading the same ones for a few years. And then for this coming cycle, we will be test optional again. So if you have test scores and would like to submit them, you're welcome to. Like Chicago, we are holistic in our review of applications. So I too am the Colorado person. I get to read all of your applications, as well as maybe visit your school, maybe in the fall virtually or in person, you never know. And we do that so that we understand the context of your school environment. That context piece is really important in understanding not only what you are doing within your particular school environment, but also understanding, the types of classes that we typically see students that are successful at Richmond taking. So there's not a set list of, certain AP or IB or dual enrollment classes that we're looking for at any in particular school. But understanding your school context is really key for us to paint that broader picture. And then again, similar to Chicago, all decisions are made in a committee setting. So there's, typically 2 reads of every application. And then I have the privilege of presenting your file to the rest of my colleagues to have a committee discussion where all decisions are made. We do have 4 ways to apply, 2 deadlines, November 1st, January 1st, binding and non-binding for both of those. And in addition, we have a scholarship deadline sandwiched right there in the middle for December 1st, which is our Richmond Scholars Program deadline. And those are our full tuition room and board scholarships.
Great, thank you. And Allie.
Yeah, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Allie Duke here from Dartmouth College. I've been working with students in Colorado for 4 years now, so happy to be here and spend some time with you all this evening. Dartmouth is on the Common application, or you can apply via the QuestBridge application if you are part of the QuestBridge program. We will require a school report and a transcript, a few letters of recommendation, 1 from your guidance counselor, 2 from your teachers, and then we have an optional peer letter of recommendation, which is a little bit unique. If you want to hear more about that, you should probably come see me in the opening Q&A. But that is sort of there because at Dartmouth, we care a lot about who you are as a person, not just as a student or as a test score. I want to know, who are you going to be as a roommate, as a lab partner, as a club co-captain. All of those things are important to us. So that's a little window into why that piece is there. We were test optional for the class of 2025. We will be test optional for the class of 2026 as well. I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about test optional later, but test optional is not a new way to spell REQUIRED. Optional truly means optional. It's totally up to you if you send those test scores or not. We are an early decision school, so decision is that binding agreement. If you want to apply to Dartmouth Early Decision, that deadline is November 1st. If you want to apply regular decision, that deadline the past 2 years has been January 2nd. That's not a typo. I don't mean January 1st. I really mean January 2nd. So that's just sort of a really brief overview about things at Dartmouth.
Great and excellent. And not to repeat too much here, but at the University of Colorado Boulder, we are only on the Common application. So that is the only way that students can apply to us. To complete the application, students must submit obviously the Common App essay. There will be an additional writing supplement that goes specifically to us, a specific question we are asking. Your high school transcripts probably seems pretty standard here. 1 academic letter of recommendation, no real preference on who writes that, but academic in nature. 1 slight difference that you're going to be hearing right now, we are still to be determined for being test optional for the upcoming year. Because you all are from the state of Colorado, if you want to advocate for being test optional, the state of Colorado actually requires that all of the public institutions in the state use test scores in the evaluation of applications. So the legislation that was passed that allowed us to be test optional for fall of 2021 only was for fall 2021. So they are currently reviewing that for upcoming, and we are hoping that we will be able to be test optional, but at the moment it is still required. Hopefully we'll have those decisions. Students apply, and both are non-binding for both of our deadlines, early action or regular decision. Those dates, early action is in November and regular decision typically in January. So we will kick it off right into the questions then. We talked about all these deadlines: early decision, early action, regular decision. Zach, we'll start with you. Is there any benefit for a student who may apply early decision versus early action, or is it going to be detrimental if they choose to do so?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Brad. And I think, one of the things that I'm going to kick off a theme that you'll probably hear tonight is that you're going to want to do your research on all the institutions you're applying to, because there are not only various policies in terms of which deadlines are available, whether schools have binding or non-binding options available, but you're also good. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. But we're going to have different policies on these pieces, and you need to also think about what's best for you in this process. So right now, you're months away. If you're a junior right now, you're months away from your application process. So you're probably hopefully building a college list. And when you build your college list, you've got schools at the top, you've got schools in the middle, and it's hopefully not too long of a list, but you're going to be looking at schools in the fall and saying, okay, they've got a binding option, they've got non-binding. What does it mean for me to do either one of those? Binding is exactly what it sounds like. You're signing along with a counselor and a parent a piece of paper, or I guess electronic signature, that says you will absolutely attend if admitted. This can be a great option for students for a couple of reasons. One, if you get admitted, like, you're done. It's a great peace of mind. You're really helping yourself out and kind of simplifying the process a little bit. Again, if it goes your way there. And from the college side, early decision exists because it helps us plan. We know that students, if we admit those students, that they're going to come, and it helps us think about what we're going to look like in the fall, and to make sure we have a full class and we're admitting students that we're really excited to have. Is there an advantage one way or the other? Well, that again depends on the institution. There are schools out there that take a large enough portion of their class early decision that if you've done your research on the financial piece, and if it is your top choice institution, then that might be the way you want to go. And those are two really important pieces there. If it's not your top choice institution, if you have questions about finances, or you haven't used tools like the net price calculator, things like that, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're admitted and you can't attend, or you're admitted and you're not excited to attend. That's really one of the things, the warnings I would put out for early decision, is that those are also going to be smaller pools at any of your institutions. At UChicago, not everybody's ready to apply ED. And that's perfectly fine. We admit students in every round. And that's another thing that's important to note, is that we're not just taking students early decision, it's all 4 rounds that we have. We're admitting students in all of those rounds. Now, I will say at UChicago, our admit rate is slightly higher if you apply through the binding round. There are a couple of reasons for that. Students are self-selecting into our binding round for a number of reasons. It's their top choice institution. They're signaling that to us. They're often demonstrating strong fit because they've done a ton of research and they know this is exactly where they want to be. So there are factors that work into that for our pool and whatnot. And that's something to consider as well. But in short, the choice should be based on your college list, all the colleges you're applying to, and making a plan for your senior year that makes sense. And again, doing your research on things like, I guess, that financial piece and where that college is on your list. So that's what I would jump in. And if others want to add to that, please do.
Yes, that was outstanding advice. And so Lindsay and Allie, please feel free to jump in on anything there.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, as an institution that has a major scholarship deadline after our first round of early decision, but prior to our second, if attendance, we always like to say, if attendance at Richmond is contingent on receiving one of those awards, early decision is not the right choice, because while there are things like the net price calculator and all of that, you can't assume that you're going to get merit-based awards, and that can't be a factor of your, well, if I get this merit-based award, I'll be able to afford it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it, because that's not something that you have control over, and something that you might not even learn at the point of your admission decision. And so that's just another caution there, that really do your homework on the financial fit for your family of an institution if you want to apply early decision.
Great, thank you. I think this next question is really relevant to most everyone, especially going through COVID, dealing with the different changes in learning styles and modes of teaching that have been happening. But what should a student do if they have a downward trend or a dip in grades? Something happens. Should they be really concerned about that? How can they express that in the application so it isn't detrimental to them? How would you suggest a student approach that? Allie, do you want to jump in there to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think we're in sort of 2 different circumstances here. One being if you have that downward trend on, let's say 5 years ago or 3 years ago. And another circumstance being if you had a little bit of a downward trend during COVID when you were virtual learning, or maybe you're babysitting your 2 younger siblings at home, or maybe you're helping facilitate their virtual learning. Like, the important piece here, and I think something that Lindsay brought up in the beginning, is context. That is absolutely crucial to the work we do. Within the Common App, there is a section for additional information. That is your space to share any context with us that will be important that isn't going to come through elsewhere. So let's say that you were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease in 11th grade, and that caused you to miss several weeks of school. That's really important for me to know. That explains why you might have a B- or a C on that transcript. So regardless of what had happened, we want to know the why behind it. I think generally in our line of work, we are looking for that upward trend versus the downward trend. But we're all human beings. We understand that things happen, things come up, mistakes are made. Maybe you got into a class that was a little bit above your head with rigor. We all want to see students who are actively seeking challenge and are working hard. So again, this really rests on that context piece. What explains what we are seeing?
Zach, it looks like you wanted to jump in there. Feel free.
Yeah, I think the one or two things that I might add is that, generally one bad grade is not the thing that's going to sink your application. Obviously, it depends on what you're interested in. There's all sorts of factors that we think about holistically and in your transcript and whatnot. But I know often there are concerns about dropping an honors or AP or IB level class or something like at a certain point, even if the grades aren't necessarily a concern. It's like, well, my rigor might look a little different, or I got like one bad grade or something like that. So it's not necessarily a trend. And I think it's important to realize that what we all mentioned earlier is that there's a lot of parts of the application. And so it's usually if a student's not getting in and people are saying, well, it's probably because I got that one bad grade. And odds are it's not that piece. It's you're applying it's a selective pool. There's a lot of factors at play. So just want to address that. If you're thinking, well, everything looks great except for this one thing, don't sweat that so much. Focus on some of the other pieces that you're going to contribute to your application.
Zach, that was a great lead into, I think, another great question here. So do you believe that for a student, it would be better to take an AP or IB course and get a B in that class, or maybe choose that less rigorous course and get the A? How might you view that in the review process?
I'll give the punchline. It's better to take the AP class and get an A. That's for those of you who, because Zoom is awkward, aren't laughing at that. That's meant to be a joke. Here's the other thing I would point to. When we think about students, again, with the transcript, it's about what's available to you, how do you take advantage of it, and ultimately, how do you perform? It's all about context. We're not necessarily comparing you to the student right next to you, and we're not necessarily comparing you to the student at a different high school because they've got different things going on. In addition to that, and we'll probably hit on this at some point, like extracurricular involvement and so on. When I think about you're challenging yourself, I want you to do it appropriately. And that's going to be something you think about, knowing your own abilities, how you found success in your freshman and sophomore year, and how you work with your counseling team or counselor at your school to choose classes, to challenge yourself, because like B's, fine. I'm pretty sure all of us admit students that have B's. And in high level courses as well. But at the same time, you should think about the courses you're taking in a way that challenges yourself appropriately, but where you also know you're going to get something out of the class. I've had students who have come to me. They're taking the highest level course in a specific area. It's not their strong suit, and they're really getting like low C, thinking worried they might get a D. And it's not just about the bad grade. It's, am I actually going to leave that class having gained the knowledge that I want to gain from it? So it's not just about the college application process. It should also be about what are you getting out of your high school experience, because you spend a lot of time in each one of these courses. So that's at least one part of what I would say for, do I take the AP and get a B versus a less rigorous and get the A?
And I think I'll just quickly add, I think Zach mentioned this really well, and Lindsay mentioned this in her introduction to their process, that we are really looking at you in context of your school. So that is why there are folks like us who work with you specifically as your admissions counselors. We're there to be a little bit more experts in your schools, but that's also why your schools are providing us school reports. So we know that if you don't have AP or honors courses in freshman and sophomore year, we will see that that might be in context to your school doesn't allow you to have that, versus maybe the school down the street where students can fill their course schedule all 4 years with AP and honors. So we really are looking at your education and your success in that education in relation to what's offered at your school. I think the theme here continues to be that context for sure. Lindsay, is there something that you wanted to add?
No. That's
all right, great. Well, Zach, you just keep leading me right into the next set of questions really, really well. But talking about some of those extracurriculars, and we've got a few questions that have come in the Q&A leading to that too. But are there any certain activities that we are looking for in the application process that have maybe more of an impact? Should students be striving for certain extracurriculars? How does the extracurricular involvement look in the application review process? Allie will go, or Lindsay actually, we'll go. We'll have
I'll jump in there. So I was perusing the chat as well, and I think part of that question is, spiky or well-rounded extracurricular involvement. And we're not looking necessarily for all well-rounded students, but we're looking for a well-rounded class. And that, I think, is the distinction. So I don't think you need to be searching for there to be a way to fill every spot. There are, I think, 10, 12 spots on the application that you can list your various activities. The instructions tell you to list them in the order of importance to you. And that's the key part, is that this is the order of importance to you. It's not what you think we want to hear. It's not what you think looks best and shiniest. And someone who got into that school because they listed this first on their application. That wasn't the reason they got in. So think about the things as you're going through your high school career, certainly in each year, but certainly in the early years, you're probably trying a little bit more things and seeing what fits, seeing what works, seeing what you really are interested in pursuing. And it's okay to have things that are only listed for grades 9 and 10. It's also okay to have things that you pick up in junior or senior year that, based on the circumstances, you become, maybe you take an environmental science class and you just absolutely fall in love with sustainability and you join your sustainability club at school, but you don't do that until junior year. That's still something we want to see. We don't necessarily need to see the same thing all 4 years. That, of course, is also wonderful, as are leadership positions, if you have a genuine interest in that. Don't just take leadership positions on to collect them, because that also might impact your ability to do well in your classes or your ability to pursue other areas of interest outside of that one particular activity. I will say this past year, we saw activities that had never been on applications before. There is a large swath of the last 13 months that a lot of the traditional activities have not been available. Students have not been able to do some of the traditional things that they think look great on college applications, whether that was internships or jobs last summer, opportunities to shadow individuals. But that also leaves room for you to put some new things that you did do during your time at home. Did you take a particular liking to, musical instruments? Did you teach yourself how to play the guitar? Did you, start working on bonsai trees? Like, what was it that was filling your time while you were trapped at home for all of these months, when you weren't in your Zoom classes and you weren't binge watching Netflix or whatever it was? But there's a lot of time that people were able to cultivate what are pretty traditionally hobbies, but that's also consumed a lot of your time. So don't be afraid to also include those on your application, because that's been a huge part of your past year. So we want to learn about that and learn about you.
Zach, go ahead.
I'm actually going to give you the secret. It's fiddle. If you learn to play the fiddle, that's what we're all looking for. We're just looking for fiddle players. No, that was a perfect answer. I just wanted to be silly.
Well, one thing that I would add there too, that, and Lindsay, I'm glad you mentioned the hobbies and things that they're doing at home, but also think about some of you may be having to work, or maybe you are taking care of family members. Those sort of things certainly include that. I think that's often left off because they're not seen as traditional forms of involvement or leadership positions. But if you're spending 5 to 6 days a week watching your little brother and sister after school for 4 or 5 hours while parents are working, that's taking up a chunk of time and maybe reducing the amount of time that you might do traditional after school activities. And those are all things that in the admissions process we're looking at. We still look at that as extracurricular involvement, leadership, those type of things. So notice that this is really tailored to get to know you and work with you specifically through the admission process, not just what might seem traditional. Got a lot of questions actually coming in here about letters of recommendation. Is there anything in particular that any of you all look for in a letter of recommendation, someone that they should certainly have write those letters? Or what would be your best advice for a letter of recommendation that has an impact? Allie, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm sort of thinking back, we've all spent months and months and months reading, I don't know, thousands of letters of recommendation. So I'm sort of consolidating all those in my head. I know at least at Dartmouth, we prefer to see teacher letters of recommendation from core subject teachers. And if possible, those you've had over your junior or senior year. I know I've received a lot of questions this year about, my senior year English teacher has only gotten to know me through Zoom. Is that going to be a problem? And again, it comes down to this context piece. Like we understand that those are the circumstances that you're in, and we're not going to fault you for that. I think it seems like there's a lot of questions about teachers, so I'll maybe tackle that first, and then maybe someone else can talk about counselors. But we're really looking to learn, who are you in the classroom? And that doesn't mean that I want to hear for every student, little Susie Q sits up front every day, is the first to raise her hand, always has the right answer. Like, that's great, but we can't fill our entire class full of little Susie Qs. We want to have students who are going to move discussion forward in really a whole host of different ways. So I want to know, are you the student who, maybe sits in the back row, but when discussion is fizzling out, you're always the one who has sort of the new novel thought that they can bring up that really inspires your classmates? Are you the one who stays after, half an hour every day after class because you want to talk with your teacher about paleontology? Like, those little aspects of who you are going to be as an intellectual and as a student and as someone who is going to engage with our faculty here on campus. That's really what I'm looking to get out of a teacher letter of recommendation. Just more facets of who you are as a human being.
Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I can just jump in thinking about, for schools that either require or have an optional counselor letter of recommendation. I'm pretty sure that the group of schools that are part of this program tonight are all in school systems or in institutions where you probably have a counselor who's going to be there and available to write a letter of recommendation for you. And teachers get to know you in that specific setting of the classroom. The class you took with them. Some of them also might be a club sponsor in addition to that. So there are other aspects of who you are that they might know, but counselors really can write holistically themselves, just knowing the types of courses you've taken based on, and then depending on whether or not you've been able to build a relationship with them, they might add other contextual pieces about who you are as a person, that again, what your interests are. That's kind of where they can also add additional information about what things we should know about course selection in the school too. So the secondary school report, the school profile gives us great information, and the counselor, in my opinion, is kind of like, it's like icing on the cake. But it adds meat, it adds icing. It can really provide some contextual information that goes beyond, just one single classroom. And so you can imagine that those pieces, again, if a school requires them, it's just a different and other ways for us to get to know you a little bit better.
I would also add some of the best letters that I've read, and this kind of goes back to that question of what if there's a dip in grades or maybe a poor grade, a lower grade in some courses. Some of the best letters of recommendation that made an impact are from those teachers where it is that class you didn't do as well. But like Allie said, they can talk about how you stayed after class, you were participating, you were asking questions, you were doing the work, but it just wasn't your subject area. And that really means something to me as someone who's trying to anticipate what your potential success might be in college, because I know that there's probably going to be that course or two that you might not be right in your wheelhouse. It's not in your major and you might struggle. And I want to know that you're going to put just as much effort into that course as all those classes in your major that you really, really, really enjoy. So maybe that's another consideration for who might write that actual letter. Sticking with, again, giving us that whole picture of who that student is, several questions coming in here, and I think we all get these questions quite a bit about essays. So, what is the importance of the essays? What are there? But is there anything specific we are looking for in those essays? And then maybe after we'll give that one tip that you would have for students writing the essay. But Lindsay, if you could, what is the purpose of those essays?
Yeah, so I mean, we have very limited amount of information to get to know you. So we've got all of those quantitative things that people tend to get really caught up on in college admissions. So the GPA, the transcript, the number of APs, the test scores when they're available or when they're not. People get hung up on those things, but the essay really is what ties the qualitative piece together. So this is your opportunity to really let us know who you are as an individual and sort of let us peek behind the curtain of who you are, because we're more than the stats and numbers that make up our rankings or what have you, and you are more than just that transcript and test score. And the essay, I think, more so than any part of the application is what you have to present right now. So like your activities, your transcript, you've done all of that. That's all sort of you reporting on things past, but the essay is a present piece. And that's where you can reflect on certainly the prompt, make sure to actually answer a prompt that you select. That's really important. I know that there are some prompts that are very similar at similar institutions, but make sure if you reuse the same essay that you are appropriately addressing the prompt, because we have those prompts to get to know a specific thing about you. Certainly the quality of your writing, how much time and effort is evident that you put into this. You don't need to be the best writer we've ever read, as long as you accurately convey what you're trying to say without super glaring spelling or grammatical errors is important. We do realize that this is not like Pulitzer Prize winning essay here. These are your college application essays, but do put in the time to make sure that you proofread and maybe have someone else read it. But that really gives us insight to who you are. I think, it's for me, it's not as much about the writing as it is the quality of the writing as it is about what you have to say. I mean, I think so often students are looking for that unusual essay or that essay that's going to make them stand out, and that doesn't have to be the case. I mean, some of the best essays that I've read are ones that are, a student reflecting on what their family means to them. I mean, I read a fantastic essay this year that was just, the youngest of 6 siblings and what all of his brothers and sisters meant to him and his parents and just the family that they created and what that means. And that's not something that's profound or deep or, going to get the flashy, like this essay got this student into all of the Ivy League schools and these other 7 highly selective institutions like you see in the news, but it really let me understand who he is and where he's coming from. One quick piece of advice on an essay: if you would not say these words to me sitting across the table from me, don't put it in your essay. Like there are lines that don't need to be crossed. So don't go for the shock factor, but be genuine. I mean, this is how we get to know who you are.
Great. Ellie, I'm going to throw this one to you. Sometimes we hear from students, or I think if you Google anything, sometimes topics that you should avoid in your essays. Do you think there's any topics that students should avoid? What's your opinion on that?
I don't think there's any one topic in particular that you should or shouldn't avoid, except perhaps to the point of Lindsay's shock value piece there. I think that the most important piece of the essay is to be authentic, to be yourself. I might read 500 essays a year about going away to camp. That's fine. You may take a really novel spin on that essay and you may bring something really unique and different to the table. And that's fantastic. That's an opportunity for me to still get a window into who you are, what you care about, what's important to you. So sort of back to Lindsay's point, it's not so much about what the topic is, but what the sentiment is behind that topic and how that allows me to get to know what you're going to bring to campus. I love to give the advice of, imagine that you have a copy of your essay, your name isn't on it, and you drop it in the halls of your high school. If I did that with my essay, would Zach walk by and pick it up and say, oh yeah, that's absolutely Allie's essay? Or would he say, well, it could be Allie's, could be Brad's, could be Lindsay's? Like, if it's the latter, it might be a sign that your essay isn't really specific enough to you and who you are. So above all, be authentic, be true to you, be true to who you are when you sit down to write those essays for us.
Great, thank you. Zach, could you maybe explain to us, and I don't know if this would be the case for University of Chicago, but demonstrated interest. What is demonstrated interest, maybe for those who have joined us that might not know, and how might that play into the admission process?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk about that. And I will say, in the general definition of what demonstrated interest is, we don't necessarily track that at the University of Chicago. So demonstrated interest can come in, I think, several different forms, though. The first is going to be quite literal in that whether you've opened emails from a school, attended events, or of course, maybe not in the last year, but visited campuses and things like that, schools might keep track of that information to try to get a sense of, well, how interested is the student? If we were to admit them, what's the likelihood that they might eventually attend? So that's something that maybe an institution could use as a tool as they think about yield, which is how many students choose to accept their offer of admission if admitted. And so that exists. It's out there. There are some schools. Most schools are going to actually, I think, be pretty forthright about it if they're keeping track of that information or if it's being incorporated into their application review process. Again, we don't do that at the University of Chicago, but I think there are other types of demonstrated interests that can exist that may not necessarily be as obvious. So if schools have early deadlines and later deadlines, if you're applying in an earlier deadline, you're letting that school know that not only are you ready to apply early, but you've made the selection that I'm going to use some of my time to apply to your institution early. Often that can be a signal that it's one of their top choice institutions. Some institutions might, when they release decisions, students can be admitted. They might probably deny students, and then they might defer students, which means they move their application to a later round. We have a wait list process at many institutions, and we encourage students to send us an email, even if they've said, yes, I want to be on your wait list. We tell them, send us an email, let us know that you're still engaged and interested in attending. And so you're demonstrating interest by sending just like one quick note to us. So that's something that we encourage students to do at Chicago. So in terms of demonstrated interest, I would say that it can come in a couple different forms, and to, again, research, ask institutions how they might take demonstrated interest into account.
Great. And I know that we're running down in our last couple of minutes. So maybe just very quickly from each of our panelists, what would be your piece of advice as students are embarking on this application process? What would be your best tip for them as they start that process? Allie, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give two quick pieces of advice. The first is proofread. If you've read it once, go back and look again. You do not spell Dartmouth College, BROWN. Please make sure that you're sending the right information to the right people. And then I think my second piece of information would be to thank those around you. There are going to be a lot of people who are sort of on this journey with you, whether that's parents, guardians, siblings, friends, your school counselor, your teachers. It takes a village. So take the time to say thank you, both to those around you and to yourself. This is a really tough process. Always advocate for, self-care and doing what you need to do to make sure that you are staying well during this process. So those are my two quick ones.
Great. Lindsay.
Yeah, so sort of similar to what Allie was saying, I think allow yourself a little bit of grace. This is a complicated process, and as we've all learned, a lot can change in a year. So be flexible and open to, having maybe a different outcome this time next year than what you're hoping for this time this year. It's always great to have schools that you're really, really interested in, but also leave a little bit of wiggle room so that right before you click submit, you can, think critically, is this going to be a good fit for me? And is this where I would like to spend 4 years? And if it's not, allow yourself to take that step back and say, okay, you know what? This is what I've been talking about. This is what I've been doing, but I'm going to allow myself to pivot and do what's right for me.
Great.
So I'll just say, if we have parents listening and students too, this might be your last year living at home with before going off to college, and who knows what happens after that. Enjoy your last year with your friends, with your family, especially if you're looking to go away to college, go out of state, wherever it might be, live in dorms, but just enjoy that time. It's a special time.
Great, thank you. And Katrina, I will send it back to you.
Thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your time and your expertise with us this evening. Immediately after this session, there is a Q&A with college reps for students only until 8 p.m. Please go ahead and visit strivescan.com/CO2021. I'm also putting that in the chat so you can see that yourself as well. We wish you all great conversations tonight, and I hope you all have a great evening. Thanks again to everyone for joining.
Bye.